Good morning. You remember VCRs? This morning, we have the opportunity to pick up a baby bottle out at the welcome desk. Every year, as part of our support of our ongoing partnership, not just with Baptist Children's Home and Family Services, but also Angels Cove, being organizations that are for life, and we as a church are going to be for life. You can pick up a baby bottle this morning, and we ask that you return it by May 10th. Throw some change in there, throw some dollar bills in there, checks up to, I think, $9,999. After $10,000, it gets a little challenging. I'm just kidding. We'll take your $10,000 check too. But just a way for us to continue to support them. We support BCHFS throughout the year, but this is kind of focused in on Angels Cove. And so we'll return that on Mother's Day, which is May the 10th. Next Sunday evening, going to be having a hymn sing here at the church. It's going to include a number of churches from throughout the community. Some groups will be singing, some individuals. Love for you to come and participate in that. That's going to start at 5 o'clock, though. Not our standard 6 o'clock, but 5 o'clock. Love for you to come and be a part of that. And speaking of next Wednesday, ladies, I know we've been talking about it for the last few weeks. Next weekend, bless it. I promise we're going to get through the text. It's going to be okay today. Next weekend is our Women Worshiping Together weekend, kind of an in-house retreat that's going to take place Friday and Saturday, Friday evening into Saturday morning. Ladies, you don't want to miss that. That is for ladies of all ages. And so we have asked you to sign up if you think about it, kind of for a couple reasons. One, there will be food provided both Saturday evening and Friday evening and Saturday morning. And so it's just kind of good to forecast that. But also one of the breakouts, there are breakouts on Saturday, and one of them includes a craft. And so we want to make sure we have enough materials for that, so you can sign up out there. But hey, ladies, if you get to next Friday and go, oh, I forgot to sign up, man, come anyway. It's going to be a fantastic time. Can't wait for you to be here. My mom's going to be speaking. She's here this morning. We've had some conversations recently about things she should say. I've given her a long list of things to talk about my sisters about. And so I may or may not be sitting front row, so I can tackle her in the middle of the service if need be. But excited she's going to be down here. My sister's going to be here as well, and one of my sisters. And so just excited that they're going to get to come for that. All right, enough stumbling through those. Holy moly. If you have a Bible, and I hope that you do, John chapter 10. Let's get to the good stuff. Yesterday we were down at, Brandy and I and Kristen, we were down at Murray seeing the big kids. There's a thing down there called All Campus Sing, which is a fun thing to go down there for. When we were over, after we kind of had a break there and I was ready to not be there anymore. We headed over to Chick-fil-A and we were hanging out there, and I ran into a kid that's friends with our two oldest. His name's Clark, and Clark was like, hey, Kirk, what are you preaching on tomorrow? And I just dove into this, man, tomorrow morning we're going to be in Romans 10 talking to blah, 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 and he's looking at me going, man, I mean, Kirk, I know Jesus is everywhere, but Jesus isn't in Romans 10. I'm like, I'm a moron. We're going to be in John 10. It's just a carryover to this morning. But we are in John 10, and I hope you have a Bible and you can turn there. Hey, so we're in this series called Walking with Jesus, and we're moving our way through the book of John, kind of through this and looking at it through this lens of what does it look like to do life with Jesus. There's no better person than Jesus to walk with. And we are blessed to get to walk with one another through life, but Jesus is the best to walk with life through. And so last week we looked at that, just an incredible story where Jesus and his disciples saw a man who was blind, and his disciples looked at Jesus and asked the question, hey, so who sinned, him or his parents? And Jesus just had a great opportunity there to say, hey, listen, it's not because this man has sinned that he is blind, but so that the Father could be glorified. And Jesus gets some dirt, spits in it, turns it into mud, puts it on his eyes, say, hey, go wash it off in a certain pool here in the community. The man did, and he could miraculously see. And it just started, this story started down just a whirlwind of conversation, mainly between this man engaged with the Pharisees, who really got upset with him because why? He was healed on the Sabbath, and they just couldn't see the miracle past their legalism. And so they're just engaging with this guy, hey, who did this? A guy named Jesus. Asked him again, kind of who did this? A prophet. And then by the end of it, they're saying, no, he couldn't have done this because a sinner wouldn't do something like that. And the man says, hey, I don't know if he's a sinner or not. All I do know is I was blind, but now I see. And then he kind of threw a dart. The man throws a dart at the Pharisees and go, and I've never heard of a sinner doing anything like this. Because if you're a sinner, if you're a sinner not with God, why would God allow you to just do something like this? Only God does things like this. And then when the man engaged with Jesus later on, because Jesus engaged with the man, it ends with the man falling down and worshiping Jesus. And as that conversation comes to a conclusion, Jesus says these words in the last few verses of chapter 9, for judgment I came into the world that those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind. And some of the Pharisees near him heard these things and said to him, are we also blind? And Jesus said to them, if you were blind, you would have no guilt, but now you say we see, your guilt remains. Jesus has exposed the Pharisees' blindness, and they claim to see, yet reject the light of the world, which is a problem. You can't claim to see and reject Jesus. Instead, when you encounter Jesus, you realize that you are blind and you need to see. But Jesus, in his continuation and conversation, doesn't stop there. In fact, Jesus continues to press further. And the real isn't just their blindness. The real issue continues, whose voice are you going to listen to? And so our passage this morning looks at this great conversation that Jesus is having with those that are standing near him. And I believe it includes everyone, including the Pharisees and religious leaders, as well as the public that is still continuing to pay attention. And I think the passage forces a question that we need to ask ourselves this morning. And here's the question: do we recognize and follow the one true God? And here the language he uses this great extended metaphor between shepherd and sheep. Do we recognize and follow the true shepherd, the one true God, or are we being led by other voices? So let's dive in this morning through this, as we look at this passage through this lens of recognizing the right voice. And Jesus begins in verse number 1 of chapter 10, really leaning into those listening that they need to be able to recognize the right shepherd. Recognize the right shepherd, truly, truly, which every time you see those words there smashed together, your translation might say verily, verily. It's a point of emphasis. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs in by another way, that man is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the gatekeeper opens. The sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. A stranger they will not follow, but they will flee from him, for they do not know the voice of strangers. We need to be able to recognize the right shepherd. And Jesus uses familiar language and familiar imagery with his listeners as he talks about a sheepfold. Shepherds in the ancient world would lead their sheep into a common pen at night, and then in the morning they'd come and they'd call out their sheep. And as they would call out their sheep, the sheep knew who was calling, and they would follow the right shepherd. And here Jesus creates this, or he provides this contrast between false shepherds and the true shepherd. False shepherds are exposed in verse number 1. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs in by another way, that man is a thief and a robber. Fake shepherds try to do things the wrong way. And they don't just try to do things the wrong way, they do things with the wrong intent. We'll see a little bit later, they seek to steal, they seek to harm, they seek to mislead. They are not about the sheep they are leading, they are about themselves. And if we were to go back into the Old Testament, over to Ezekiel chapter 34, a passage where God is laying into the shepherds of Israel for neglecting the people of God, we would find this verse in verse number 4. The weak you have not strengthened, the sick you have not healed, the injured you have not bound up, the strayed you have not brought back, the lost you have not sought, and with force and harshness you have ruled them. Who wants to follow a shepherd like that? No one wants to follow a shepherd like that. And in Ezekiel, God is leaning into the people of God that have taken on that shepherd of God's people mantle, yet they are not leading the people of God very well. False shepherds try to do things their own way, and they try to do things in a way that benefits just them. Who would want to follow a false shepherd? No one in their right mind. Which is why the true shepherd looks so drastically different. In verse number 2, the true shepherd enters by the door, not the back way. The true shepherd is legitimate. He's supposed to be there. In verse number 3, the true shepherd calls his sheep by name. There is a personal knowledge. Can I tell you this? In a room this morning, this size, knowing that there have been people of God who have worshiped the Lord throughout the world. If you're a follower of God, God never looks at you and mistakes you for a different person. God knows you by name, which is way better than I am at home with my kids. I have 3 children, and I usually get Jeremiah's name right the first time. But bless the girls' hearts. I mean, I get it wrong so often. I don't think I've ever called them the dog's name. But you never know. God never gets our name wrong. If you're a follower of the one true God, God knows your name. He has a personal knowledge. It says in verses 3 and 4 that he leads them out. To him, the gatekeeper opens, the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. It's relational, not coercive. And as he leads them out, he's out there in front of them. When he has brought out all of his sheep, out all his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. He is not distant, he is present. He is not driving, he is leading. Which one would you rather follow? Who would you rather your shepherd be? Someone who is driving you or someone who is leading you? The true shepherd does things differently. False shepherds are about themselves. The true shepherd cares for his flock. And the sheep know the shepherd. In verse number 3, they hear his voice. In verse number 4, they know his voice. Verse number 4, they follow him. In verse number 5, they run away from those who aren't their true shepherd. Verse number 5, a stranger they will not follow, but they will flee from him, for they do not know the voice of strangers. I remember when our kids were little and we would go places like to a playground or whatever, we would tell our kids, remind our kids to listen for the sound of our voice. And if we were to speak to you, we expect you to respond. You ever been in a playground that was just inundated with kids? And one mama would use mama voice and all the kids would stop? Because there's no voice like a mama voice. We would tell our kids, listen for our voice. And then respond to our voice. And we would want them to do that, not because we wanted to be in some authoritative position over them, but because we knew that God had called us to raise our children to love the Lord and also to take care of our children. We tell them, hey, listen to the sound of our voice so you can remain under our umbrella of protection. The sheep that follow the true shepherd hear his voice, know his voice, follow him, and then they run away from those who are the false shepherds. The people of God recognize the voice of God. And we refuse to follow voices that destroy that distort his truth. I think we have a lot of false shepherds, competing shepherds in the world in which we live today. There are a lot of cultural voices that are vying for our attention. There are a number of personal desires that rest within our own hearts that we listen to ourselves. And I don't know about you, when I'm listening to myself over the voice of God, I find myself in trouble. There are even influencers, leaders, religious sources that are trying to get us to listen to them. And we need to understand that not all of these voices are neutral. In fact, many of these voices are destructive. They will lead us down the wrong path for their name's sake. They're not true shepherds. So I think the steps we need to find ourselves taking is first and foremost to evaluate the voices that are shaping our lives. What voice is shaping your life? Who are you listening to? Who are you giving your time to? Who are you letting speak into the way that you carry yourself, the things that you do? What voices are you listening to? And the way that we counteract that is we immerse ourselves in knowing the one true voice. And the only way that we know the voice of God, the best way we know the voice of God, is to spend time in the Word of God. Because you cannot recognize the shepherd's voice if you are unfamiliar with it. Some of you have been married for a long time, and that's not a bad thing. You shouldn't look at each other and go, yeah, I know. I mean, that's not the right tone. Yeah, no. There's those two things, those mean different things. Brandy and I this June will be married for 25 years. You could put me in a room with 1,000 people, and if she laughs, I'll know it. And if you've gotten to know Brandy, if she laughs, everyone will know it. She's little, but has this big old laugh. I remember our first command sergeant major in the Army, Sergeant Major Richardson, a quiet, gentle person. God did not issue him a smile. He never showed his teeth unless he was scowling at you. He was an incredible professional. And then one day we're at an event and Brandy and I walk up to Sergeant Major Richardson and he smiled. And I went, I'm your chaplain. You can smile at me. And the thing that he said was, I always love to hear Brandy's laugh. It's a familiar sound. Should we also not be familiar with the voice, or even more so, familiar with the voice of God? You need to recognize the right shepherd. And then Jesus continues on. He makes one of those profound I am statements because he realizes people really aren't following. Verse number 6, this figure of speech Jesus used with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. So Jesus clarifies. And he says to them, truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. When you recognize the right shepherd and you find yourself engaged with Jesus, know this, that Jesus is the only door worth entering. And it's as we enter this door, when Jesus says, I am the door, he is saying exclusively that through him we have access to salvation. You can't get saved any other way. And it's through the door of Jesus that we find that his sheep find protection and provision. And once again, he provides a contrast, something that we can differentiate between those who would provide salvation or the one who would provide salvation and those who don't. He says, verse 10, the thief comes only to steal and to kill and to destroy. I came that they may have life and have it what? Abundantly. It's not just this little old thing. It is something that only he can provide. And we talk about abundant life. Abundant life doesn't mean something that's easy. Instead, it means something that is full, something that is rich, and something that provides security in Jesus and Jesus alone. Jesus is not one of many ways. Jesus is the only way. And if you understand and catch nothing other than that this morning, that's what you need to catch. Jesus is the way. He's the way to salvation. He's the only source for true life. He's the only means for abundant life. And I think there's a world in which we live, and it's been like this for a long time, where many tried to climb into salvation another way. One of the ways that I observe people trying to attain salvation is through their own moral effort. If they can just do enough good. There are two problems with that. Number one, why would you want to do something just good enough? That's just like skating by. But what makes us think that we can actually be good? I can't be good enough to get to Jesus. There's not enough good in me to get to Jesus. I don't do good on accident. I do bad naturally. Anybody else? You don't have to work at it. If you think that people are inherently good, you need to spend some time with our 2-year-olds here at church. I mean, they're Swedish. Not Swedish. Sweet-ish. Those are not the same things, Greg. I guess you can have Swedish. Oh no. The rabbit hole. Get out of the hole. They're sort of sweet, but you don't have to teach a 2-year-old to snatch toys from somebody. You don't have to teach a 2-year-old to reach back and striketh someone in the face. We're inclined toward that which is not good, which means our moral effort is not good enough. Sometimes people think religious activity is the way in which we can climb into salvation. But God will look at no one and say, "Welcome home, my perfect attendance church person." Do I think we need to come together and gather as a body of believers? Absolutely. We should do so regularly. We should rejoice in it. We just need to understand this event doesn't save us. There is no salvation apart from Christ. There's only one door. Yesterday, Brandy and I were talking on our, way back from Murray, and she mentioned listening to a podcast that was talking about the 2019 college admissions scandal. Some of you might remember that. I think the operation to take down this scandal was, or this whole thing that was going on was called Varsity Blues operation. And then here's what was happening. There was an individual named William Singer, which was the scheme organizer, who was helping people get their kids into college. And the college, the university that they were predominantly found that all this stuff was going on was at the University of Southern California. And as he was talking, he talked about 2 legitimate ways to get your kid into college. There are 2 legitimate ways. The first legitimate way is through the front door. And that's what he called it. He referenced it through the front door. It's the right test scores. You wrote your essay correctly, whatever that is. I didn't have to do that. Anybody remember when getting into college was not a 3-month exercise? Holy moly. There's like a video out there recently that said, me when I was trying to get into college, do you want to go here? Yes. And then a week later, you found out if you met the requirements. Today, your kids will call you and say, "Hey, what was your favorite activity when you were 3.5 years old?" It's like, why do you need that information? I'm filling out my college application. What is wrong with you people? Legitimate ways through the front door. Made the right test scores. entered into a program that had space for me, whatever. I got in the right way. The other way is to get in through the back door. And it's a legitimate way, but it's kind of donor-based. i.e., if your parents give $10 million to a university, there's a good chance you get to go there. And I know this room is filled with people that is your story. And if it is, your parents can come by this week. We can talk about a new wing of the church. No, I'm just messing. I can't. I think somebody was like, oh no, just joking. Front door, legitimate. Back door, legitimate. This guy created what he called the side door. It wasn't as expensive as the back door. Back door, you buy a $10 million building, kid can go to school. Side door, it didn't cost as much. You paid him, and what he did is he helped either fabricate test scores or he bribed individuals at the university to help you get into school. And one of the ways they did that is by working with these coaches to give a kid a spot on the team that they weren't qualified to do, but it helped them get into school. Church, we live in a world where we are accustomed to getting our way, getting in another way, or getting in our way. But that's not how it works with God. There is one way. There is one door. And Jesus is the door. We must recognize the right shepherd and enter through the only door worth walking through. And as Jesus continues to talk to the crowd and to interact and even speak, I believe, in a very convincing way, but also in a very not well-received way to the Pharisees, he leans into the sacrifice that the Good Shepherd makes. And we can see, and we should see, that we should trust the sacrifice of the Good Shepherd. He refers to himself as the door in verses 7 and 9. Then in verse number 10, he says, verse number 11, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them. He flees because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. Skip to verse number 17. For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life that I may take it up. Again, no one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it up again. This charge I have received from my Father. What does Jesus say? Jesus says, I am the good shepherd, and I am the one who sacrifices, and you can trust that sacrifice. And he compares himself to the hired hand versus the good shepherd. And the hired hand here isn't necessarily a Pharisee or a religious leader who's doing nefarious things, but it's someone that's not completely bought in. When danger makes its way into the fold, the hired hand flees. He prioritizes self-preservation. Jesus, the good shepherd, does the opposite. He stays, he sacrifices, he dies for the sheep. And he explains what all is taking place as he lays down his life. Verse number 18, he voluntarily lays down his life. No one takes it from me. He intentionally lays down his life. I lay it down. He does so with authority. He has the power to lay it down. He has the power to take it up again. And he is unified with the Father, which means it is a unified mission that they make with one another. Here's what you need to know about Jesus. Jesus did not die a martyr. Jesus died on purpose. Jesus intentionally laid down his life so that we might be saved. And this is what makes him different than any other shepherd in the world. This is why he is the one good shepherd. See, a shepherd would take care of his sheep and would knowingly put himself in harm's way in order to take care of his sheep. But I don't see any shepherd willingly, intentionally, on purpose, laying down his life for his sheep. He might find himself caught up in a little scuffle. If one of his sheep is being attacked, he might try to save that sheep, but he's not going to go and intentionally get himself killed and potentially then sacrifice the other 99 sheep that might be there. But that's not how Jesus did things. Jesus did things differently. Jesus willingly, intentionally, on purpose, went to the cross so that we might be saved. And you can trust the sacrifice of the Good Shepherd. There is no sacrifice that compares to his sacrifice. So when we look at Jesus, he's not distant, he's not indifferent, he's not self-serving, he is sacrificial. He lives and leads his life sacrificially. And he does so we might have everlasting life. Sometimes I find myself intrigued in reading through different medals of honor citations of individuals that have received the Medal of Honor, and they're all spectacular. Even the ones that you look at and go, well, that wasn't as crazy as that guy's, but they're all crazy. The things that people are willing to do to run into battle in order to save potentially even a fallen comrade, someone who's already lost their life, but they have this creed, they have this thing that's imprinted in their mind that I will never leave a fallen comrade. Some of the citations are absolutely spectacular, but none of those citations compare to Jesus' citation, where he willingly went to the cross. He intentionally went to the cross. Church, you can trust that sacrifice. And we understand as Jesus is speaking that sacrifice wasn't made for just a small few select fortunate Israelites. When Jesus went to the cross, he went to the cross for you and me as well. Verse number 16. He says, and I have other sheep that are not of this fold. And there, when he's talking about the fold, he's referencing Israel. He's meaning Israel. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. Jesus expands the scope of his sacrifice. It's not just Israel, but it's for the nations. Aren't you thankful for that? Aren't you thankful that Jesus went to the cross, not just for them. Jesus went to the cross for you. In Ephesians chapter 4, we read about this anticipated unity. Let me read it to you. Ephesians chapter 2. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 12 through 22. You can follow along if you want to, or you can just listen to the words of Paul. It says, remember that you were at that time separated from Christ, alienated from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers to the covenants of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. He's speaking of Gentiles. But now in Christ Jesus, you who once were far off have been brought near by the blood of Christ. For he himself is our peace, who has made us both one and has broken down in his flesh the dividing wall of hostility by abolishing the law of commandments expressed in ordinances, that he might create in himself one new man in place of the two, so making peace, and might reconcile us both to God in one body through the cross, thereby killing the hostility. And he came and preached peace to you who were far off and peace to those who were near. For through him we have both access in one spirit to the Father. So then, you are no longer strangers. This is good stuff. So then, you are no longer strangers. So then, we are no longer strangers and aliens, but are fellow citizens with the saints and members of the household of God. Jesus didn't just come and die for them. Jesus came and died for you. Which I think means that we need to recognize and really wrap our arms around the fact that the gospel is not limited in its reach. And the church is not a club that excludes people based on race, based on socioeconomic status, based on gender. Who needs the salvation of Jesus Christ? We all do. And so there's a decision point. Then there's a decision point now. As Jesus spoke, he was notorious for on the back end of his conversations and his interaction with people, there would be this division that would naturally fester to the top. There were some that said, "You're nuts." And then there were some that said, "Yeah, I'm not sure that's the case." Verse number 19, there was again a division among the Jews because of his words. Many of them said, "He has a demon and is insane. Why listen to him?" Others said, "These are not the words of one who is oppressed by a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind?" Church, I'm here to tell you this morning, Jesus was not possessed by a demon. Jesus was not insane. Jesus was, and he is, the Son of the one true God, the only begotten. And there is no other way except through Jesus. Every person must decide how they will respond to the Good Shepherd. Either you believe or you don't. Neutral is not an option. Some will dismiss, and some people here will dismiss Jesus. Others believe. Whose voice are you going to follow? When I was at the chaplain school, as I was getting into the Army, I was blessed to have some senior chaplains that devoted their time and energy and really were intentional in speaking into our lives as new chaplains, as future chaplains. And I remember one chaplain talking to a group of us one day, and he said, you want to know your people well enough to where when you speak to them in the dark, they know your voice. I thought that was weird. What he was saying is the people need to know you, so when you find yourself speaking or in their presence, they know it's you. And sure enough, I remember it was probably about 5 years later, I was at a final ceremony for young men and women who had gone through basic training in AIT, and they were about to become military police for the first time. They were receiving their regimental insignia that day, and it was a very emotional day. And I remember I'm walking, and I wasn't important. I still am not. So I was deep in the line walking, and battalion commander was in front, and sergeant major was with him, and the company commander and the first sergeant, and everybody else who wanted to go, and hey, chaplain, stand back there. And so we're kind of walking through the line. I remember seeing my battalion commander up front. His name was a guy named Randy Thrash, and Randy's remained a good friend to this day. And Randy stops, and he looks at a soldier, and he looks at me, and he says, "Who's that guy?" And I went, "I don't know who this kid is." He didn't ask me, he asked the kid. And he said, "Sir, that's my chaplain." And I went, whew. You know what? It was fine that kid knew who I was. But that wasn't the most important voice that kid could know. The most important voice you will ever listen to and follow is the voice of God. Do you recognize his voice? And are you following him? I invite you to bow your heads, close your eyes. Praise team's going to come up and lead us in a final song. And as I know there's some movement and moving around, try not to get distracted here in this moment. Because as you're there with your head bowed, just allow yourself to find yourself interacting with God. Because I believe today Jesus is calling to us to recognize his voice. And as you recognize his voice, to enter through him alone. To trust the sacrifice that he willingly made for you. Today I'm going to invite you to follow him. The question is not whether Jesus is speaking. The question is whether we are listening. Are you following the Good Shepherd? Father, thank you for preserving for us the words of Jesus, your words, so that today, on April the 19th, 2026, we could be face to face with a very real question. Are we listening to and following your voice, or are we going to say no to that voice? Father, I believe there are people here today who need to say yes to you. Today needs to be the day of salvation in their life. They need to, according to your word, confess their sin, knowing that you are faithful and just to forgive them of their sin and to cleanse them from all unrighteousness. Jesus, you're the way, and there is no other way. There's no back door, there's no side door, there's only the front door. So, Father, I ask what only you can do. I ask you to move mountains in people's hearts. God, I ask you to set aside the barriers that are keeping people from stepping out and saying yes. What are people going to think? God, I pray you'll help them set that question aside. So, Father, as we respond to you, may our feet not be set in stone, but instead help us take a step towards you today. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Hey, church, I'm going to be down here in the front. Would love to talk to you about a next step God might be calling you to make. Maybe it's one towards salvation. You just don't get this what it means to be saved thing. We'd love to have that conversation with you. I can't think of a conversation we'd love to have with you more than that. Maybe you realize that God is maybe calling you to something that you're just not completely aware of. Maybe you've been walking with Jesus for a long time and you realize that there is a stirring in your heart to go deeper in your walk with the Lord, and you're not sure exactly what that looks like. And don't push that aside, but say yes to it today. So like I said, I'd love to talk with you. Pastor Greg's right down here. He'd love to chat with you as well. Ladies, Brandy's here. Dara's just right over here as well. Man, grab somebody and don't push the conversation to the side. Church, let's stand as we respond to the Lord.